Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today's video was going to be a bit of a rant, but realistically that's not me. So instead I decided to make this an informative video. That way you guys don't make the same mistake that I made, where I went to the store and I bought something that's not actually a whiskey for $100. So let me ask you guys a question. What do you actually know about Japanese whiskey? This is Yamato whiskey. It says right there, Yamato whiskey, samurai edition, product of Japan. Japanese whiskey, right? Nope. Now that's the problem. I spent $100 on this bottle because I said to myself, you know what? I'm in the mood for a Japanese whiskey. This one looks cool. I'll be able to keep it on the shelf for a while. It'll be a nice little set piece, right? But no, it's not actually whiskey. And that was so heartbreaking. When I got home, I actually almost returned it. But I decided to kind of turn, lemons into lemonade and do a video where I could kind of try to educate you guys. But let me ask you a question. Here's a little quiz for you. So some of you will get this. Nikka coffee grain whiskey. Is this a Japanese whiskey? Yes, it is. What about Nikka from the barrel? Same distillery, not Japanese whiskey. This has some Ben Nevis from Scotland in it. Which, what? So now here's kind of the trick question. And I'll be curious to know how many of you get this right. So tell me in the comments. Is Suntory Toki Japanese whiskey? Yes, actually it is. But I bet you wondered. And that's a problem. You never wonder whether a bourbon is a bourbon or a scotch is a scotch or an Irish whiskey is an Irish whiskey. And yes, there have been some changes to Japanese law, but they don't have to abide by those laws until 2024. So we've still got about 3 years left to wonder what we're buying. Now, I do have a couple of tricks and tips or whatever you want to call them to help you better identify. But more so what I want to do is kind of vocalize my frustration and use this platform that I have to say, what the heck are you guys doing? Don't buy Japanese whiskey. Like, boycott this stuff. It's ridiculous that people are able to do this because of the way that American laws are. Now, let's get a couple of things out of the way, just because it's important to know that Japanese whiskey really started to blow up only a couple of years ago. Some of the best whiskeys in the world and most expensive are from Japan. And there's a reason for that. And as I mentioned, they blew up so quick that they ran out of stock. So now their old stuff is super limited. And even their young stuff like the Yamazaki 12, just the other day, I realized its MSRP is $200. When I first started this channel like 7 years-ish ago, my grandmother bought me a bottle of Yamazaki 12. And I think it was expensive, but it wasn't $200. But more importantly, she was able to find it. I think she just spotted it and said, oh, cool, I'll get this for Bill. He likes whiskey. So that is crazy. But because of this and running out of the stock, you started having these kind of copycat distilleries starting up. It's similar to what we're seeing in the US right now, where so many new distilleries are coming out and they are sourced by MGP, which is great, the taste-wise. But when you make up fake stories, that's kind of a problem. Over in Japan instead, because their rules and their laws are a little bit more lax when it comes to whiskey, they are able to put something other than what is actually Japanese whiskey into the bottle. Here's where it's good. This whole thing isn't just doom and gloom and complaining, right? In February of 2021, there were some new laws that were proposed and approved in Japan. And this is where I was mentioning they have until 2024 to change this. But these are the new rules around Japanese whiskey. The spirit must be fermented, distilled, and aged at a distillery in Japan. Makes sense. It must contain malted grain, but it can also use other cereal grains. The water used to make it needs to be from Japan, the spirit must be aged at least 3 years, and it must be bottled in Japan. So it actually follows a lot of the same rules as Scotch does. But here's the trick, and this is why you can get things on the shelf now that are a problem. Existing products have until March 31st, 2024 in order to fully change over their labels, which is great, but it's still a couple years away. But, it's whiskey. Things don't move super fast. Either way, I personally will not be buying any other Japanese whiskeys unless it's from a couple of brands that are 100% following the rules already. Yamazaki, Toki, Hakushu, and Hibiki. Now, all of those are Japanese whiskeys. So, you can kind of buy with confidence. Now, it wouldn't be very helpful for me to just put all of this information in front of you and say, good luck, remember it. So I looked through this official Japanese document of how to properly label your Japanese whiskey. And I noticed something interesting. So Article 6, don't get bored, I promise. Don't glass over just because I said Article 6. Article 6 of this document says they need to remove the word Japanese from their labels. Now, this is important, right? This says Japanese whiskey. This says product of Japan. Now, anybody here who's been in marketing knows that those are very different words, even if they have almost the same implication. So, additionally, they can't mention anything about Japan's culture, language, history, writing, or the flag on the label. They can't have names of people that evoke Japan, names of Japanese cities, regions, famous places, mountains, or rivers, the Japanese flag or Japanese era name, or any other label that basically confuses people. I think these are all good rules. I think that they were pretty well thought out. Honestly, they're very reflective of what Scotch does, which is fine. Scotch spends a lot of time thinking about their brands, so it makes sense to copy them, and they should. I just hate that we have to wait years before we can trust what's being put out. Now, I did promise myself a drink, and for those of you who are interested, this is actually the first pour out of this bottle, which is conveniently out of the back of his back. So, oh well. I mean, maybe it'll be good anyway. It certainly looks like whiskey. So, smells like a young... Actually, there's an off-putting nose there. I'm not going to do a full review. I'm more just going to not kick it back. I'm going to sip it, tell you what I think. So, let's see. Cheers. Very thin. Not worth $100. This is why you're paying that kind of money. This tastes similar to this, which is also very thin, by the way. I actually probably like this a little bit more than that, but it's nothing that I would ever spend that kind of money on. So don't, give it some thought. Think about the words I said. If you're considering buying Japanese whiskey, the word Japanese is more important than Japan. And just if it doesn't appear like it should be Japanese whiskey, don't buy it. When I saw this, I should have known better and learned from my lesson. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Cheers.